Hello guys, this is going to be another video on the John Deere 8360 RT model, and today I'm going to have a look at finishing off the cab of the tractor. So to do that we need to install another microcontroller and a radio module. So recently I decided to start using these NRF24 radio modules because they're pretty cheap. This one cost $1.80. and you can get a smaller version than this for I think it's around about $5, and basically they seem to be a pretty simple module that should work pretty perfectly for our tractors. Now, for today I'm going to mount the radio module in this direction with the antenna facing the back of the tractor. This is the antenna here. It's called an inverted F antenna. So you don't want to put any wires across the antenna here, or you don't want to put the antenna behind the die-cast. Say if the roof was die-cast, you wouldn't want to put the antenna up beside a die-cast roof, because you're going to have terrible radiation pattern. So plastic roof, we'll put the antenna facing the back here. So the antenna is here and the mounting screws are all over here, so kind of out of the way, so that should be alright. Then we got our microcontroller and we'll mount it in a similar enough position. The microcontroller I'm using is another Arduino Pro Mini, but this one's a little bit different to the one that I usually show you, and that's because this radio module needs to work at 3.3 volts. We can't put 5 volts on this on the pins of this radio module. So I've looked on eBay and got a 3.3 volt Arduino Pro Mini, and you switch the voltage by changing this little solder jumper here. So at the minute the left two connections are made, but we want the right connections. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is solder that. So this is the jumper that I'm talking about. So these two are connected, and you can see a little gap here. So we want to connect the center one here and this one over here. So we need to connect these two, and the gap should be over this side. Okay, so now you should be able to see that I've changed the jumper here. So now the gap is on this side. So here's the gap here, and these two are connected. So that's all you have to do to change this Arduino from 5 volt to 3.3 volts. That's just changing the regulator. So that'll let us work with this radio module. If you're wondering why I'm putting another microcontroller in the cab, it's because this radio module is an SPI module, so it doesn't use UART to communicate, which would mean we would need 7 extra wires going to the tractor. No, sorry, 5 extra wires going into the tractor, which would leave us with 7 wires in total, which isn't great. Actually 7 wires, and then we'd need extra wires for the lights. So if we put the microcontroller in the cab along with the radio, then we only need 4 wires going from the cab down into the tractor. And this microcontroller can control all the lights on the cab, and the other microcontroller can control the motors, the servos, and the lights on the tractor, which gives us a lot more options. We can control a lot more if we have the 2 microcontrollers. The lights we're going to add to this, the lights we're going to add to the cab are going to be 2 orange LEDs for indicators. We're just going to mount them there, and a load of these super bright 5mm LEDs. I'm thinking 2 here, 2 here, and 2 at the back here. And if I can find an orange LED, I'll mount it up there, or I don't think I have any, but if I find one I'll do that, or maybe I'll see what a red LED looks like or something like that. So the first thing we need to do is take the cab apart, which looks like it's going to be pretty simple because it's actually screwed together, which will hopefully leave things a lot simpler for us to modify. There's 5 screws holding it together. Okay, so hopefully this will just all come apart. Take our mirrors off. That's the first part of it off, and this just slides apart. And our little beacon there. So we're going to want to mill out 2 of these to add in our 5mm LEDs. So they should just sit in there, no problem. So we don't want to use these header pins, so to remove them I'm just going to cut this plastic here, and then we can just take the pins off. Pins should just, when we put the soldering iron on them, they should just fall out. So just take the plastic off each pin, and then it should be a fairly simple job. Okay, so there's the first pin out. Just going to repeat that for all the pins. There's all the header pins removed from the radio module here, so that should let us mount that in here pretty easily. Then we'll get some short pieces of wire and connect to the Arduino. So the end result will probably be something like that. So it should be pretty high, and when you're looking down you shouldn't see it, you know, be all under the cab, all under the roof. So I've also drilled the holes in, or to mount the lights, so we have holes in different places around here. The indicators go in something like that. The work lights, well, won't fit in there because of the exhaust, but that's the kind of idea there. And also in the cab, or in the roof, I probably got a bit carried away with the roof, to be honest. I have 8 of these lights, or mounting holes for 8 of these lights around the cab now. So there'll be 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, and 2 here. Now we have to also mount a transistor for this, and I'm thinking we can hide the transistor in this hollow piece of the exhaust here, so that should work. Also, we need to consider the orientation of the radio module when we're wiring the LEDs here. So our radio module is going to be in like this, our antenna is going to be at the back here. So the wires for these lights are going to have to come around these screws, or the mounting posts for the screws here, go around here and go around here, and that will avoid causing any interference with our antenna here. So we should have a good signal there if we make sure and keep all the wires away from the antenna. We're going to want to run the wires down. I'm going to have to cut a little hole here and run the wires down the side of the cab here into the exhaust for the transistor. But other than that, it should be fairly simple build. But the next step that we're going to have to do is to mock up the transistor circuit for all these LEDs, because we want all these LEDs working together, and the only way to do that really is with an NPN transistor. So to make sure that we have enough power to light all the LEDs, we'll mock it up on a breadboard now. Here's the circuit for the LEDs. So we have our battery here, we have our 10 LEDs in parallel, and a 22 ohm resistor to limit the current. More because if we were to let these LEDs go at full power, our battery wouldn't last more than a couple of minutes. So I've limited the current here to around about 50 milliamps, I think. So if I give it power, you should see on the multimeter there we have around about 55 milliamps, roughly 55 milliamps. 50 milliamps is too much for our microcontroller, so we're going to use a transistor to switch the LEDs on and off. So the positive of the battery goes to the anode of the diodes. The cathode of the diodes then goes to one leg of our resistor. The other leg goes to the collector of our transistor, and the emitter of the transistor goes to ground. Then we have a 1000 ohm resistor on the base of the transistor, so that when we put positive voltage on the resistor, which is connected to the base, it'll turn on the LEDs. And just to see what current that takes. Okay, so now it takes about 3.6 milliamps to turn on this these LEDs using the transistor. And that's perfect for our microcontroller. Should have no problem with that. Now that we have our circuit for our LEDs, I'm going to mount them on the roof of the cab first, because that is the top layer of the tractor, and it's just going to be the LEDs on this layer. So we need to wire all the anodes together and all the cathodes together, and then we should have a positive voltage wire which will connect to our raw pin on our microcontroller here, because we want the lights to be connected directly to the battery. We want them to get 3.8 volts. Don't connect the LEDs to the VCC pin of this microcontroller. The voltage regulator in this microcontroller won't be able to cope with the high currents that you need for these LEDs. Well, the relatively high currents, 50 milliamps isn't very high, but the regulator in this is only for small currents. You're expected to use a transistor to power LEDs or anything like this, so don't do that or you'll damage your microcontroller. So that's going to be connected to the raw pin, because the raw pin is the input of the voltage regulator on this. And then our other wire is going to come down to our transistor, which we're going to hide in here. And that should be it. So I'll solder all that up and we'll start putting it together. Here's the lights on the top of the cab. We have 4 on the front, 4 on the back, and these are the working lights, so they're pretty bright. We have tested out here, so there you go. We've quite a bit of light out of that there, and it still fits back on the cab without much problem. Everything is fitting exactly as it's supposed to fit, so that's what it looks like from the front. From the back, isn't too bad. So I've decided to remove the beacon, so I'm not going to bother putting any LED for that, just going to forget about that. And next I'm going to have to add the transistor in here to switch these on and off, and also to add the other 2 lights here and the 2 indicator lights here. I'm going to try and hide the wires going back up into the cab here, and to do that I'm going to try and use some of this enamel wire. This is out of some sort of motor or something that obviously I salvaged out of something a long time ago, but I'm just going to solder this wire to our LEDs and run it up the inside of the kind of supporting structure of the cab here. With any luck, that'll be large enough to supply enough current to turn on these LEDs. Okay, so I have the transistor here with the resistor to limit the current to the LEDs, and the resistor to limit the current to the microcontroller. And I've drilled 3 holes in the bottom of this, and I'm going to thread them up here and then connect these wires to the lights that are going to go here on this side, lights here. Here's the cab all wired up. We have our indicators wired with the enameled wire. So with this wire here, we have the indicator and the work light on this side. The wires go along here, in here behind this glass piece, up to the roof up here, across here, and back down to meet the wires on this side. The other wire for the indicator goes up here to a resistor. The enameled wire was a little bit tricky to thread through the cab without breaking it, but it seems to have worked out pretty good. So now we can test out these lights. We have our ground wire here. Oh, our transistor is hidden in here. You can just see it in there, the transistor and the 2 resistors. So if I hook this up to the ground, then if we get the indicator resistor here, that's one of our indicators. There's our other indicator. If we hook our work lights up to ground and up to the positive connection. We can take another wire from the positive, connect it to the resistor for the transistor which switches on the LEDs, and we get our work lights. So all the lights on this side are completely connected using this enameled wire. Now, it was tricky, but the end result is pretty good. The next stage now is to connect these wires to our roof of our tractor, and hopefully we'll just be able to hinge that closed like that when we have the wires connected, and then that will let us move on to connecting our Arduino and our radio module. Okay, well, I've wired up the lights in the cab to the front lights here, so we should have LEDs now. Here we go, that's all 10 of those are working perfectly, so that's a good start. Looks like I made a bit of a mistake here. I ran the wires into the cab just above where the wing mirror goes, completely forgot about the wing mirror, so that's now a little bit bent down because of the wires, but it's good enough. I'm not going to change that now. It's it'll be pretty messy to try to take the wires out. But anyway, the important thing is our lights are now working for our indicators and our spotlights. One thing we need to do before we put the cab back together is there is a little pin here that we don't need, and another one on the back, and if we get rid of those, that'll let us move our radio module into what possibly better position when it comes to installing it in the cab. So at the minute we're kind of limited to between these pins, but if we cut them off now, that'll leave it a little bit free, a little bit more free. And I guess this model must be a radio controlled model, because or at least the cab must be off a radio control model, because that looks like it's the pins for a PCB there. So here is the radio module wired up to our Arduino, and that is just going to sit in here like this, so that from above you shouldn't be able to see too much, you'll only see the wires coming down, and these pins are just going to connect to these wires. Okay, so we have it wired up to the tractor now. We'll do a little test. We'll just turn on the headlights here. Okay, so obviously that's working fine. So I'll mount this in the tractor and then we'll pretty much be good to go. I have a good bit of code to write for this yet, so I won't be able to test it this weekend, but when I sort out the code, I'll be able to test all the LEDs. So here it is finished. We have our Arduino in here. Our radio module is in under the, well, in between the glass and the roof of the cab, and we just need to connect our pins for our ground, our raw voltage, which is directly to the battery, and our RX and TX pins. So we'll just connect them. And that's that. Now, before I put the roof on properly, I'll check that I have the wires for the RX and TX the right way around. So I'll turn it on. Okay, so the lights are on the right way around, so I'll close down the cab. There we go. Our module in there, and all our LEDs are on the tractor. Now I have a bit of work to do on the code here, because I haven't added any code to control the, well, any of the LEDs or to properly communicate with the bottom of the tractor. So I need to work on all of that code, which I'll do next week. Well, that's everything for today. It'll probably take me a while to write all the code for this tractor. I'll also need to upgrade the controller to use these NRF24 modules, and from now on all the tractors are going to be using these modules because they're an awful lot cheaper. They're about $18 cheaper than, actually they're not, they're about €19 cheaper than and the XP modules. So from now on all the tractors will be including these. I'm going to have to upgrade the other tractors to do that, and upgrade the controller, so I'll be doing that in the next few weeks. I'll be doing another video when I finish this model showing the different functions, so if you want to see that, make sure and subscribe. And if you have any questions on this build, you can ask them below the video or shoot over to the forum, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. That's everything, so thanks very much for watching.